Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michael Kozart, and I'm a managing partner at LifeSci Consulting. Joining me in the call this morning is another partner at LifeSci Consulting, Trey Turner. I'll let Trey introduce himself here in a moment, but really what we wanted to talk about in today's call, firstly present who is LifeSci Consulting, what do we do, but in particular, talk about the importance of really understanding the commercial opportunity of your drug, of your program, before going out to investors, before going out into strategics, et cetera. So before I get into LifeSci Consulting, Trey, maybe just say a couple words about yourself and your career path.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for joining, everybody. My name is Trey Turner. Like Michael said, I'm a partner at LifeSci Consulting. Spent my career in the strategic advisory role for biopharmas and biotechs, both small and large. I've been at a couple firms now supporting these companies with their corporate and business development activities. Prior to joining the consulting field, my academic background is in chemical engineering. I studied at Yale University and performed medical research on that campus as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Trey. So before we get into today's discussion topic, just a bit of a background on LifeSci Partners and LifeSci Consulting in particular. So who is LifeSci Partners? We are a leading consulting and advisory service solely dedicated to the life sciences. We have offices across the globe. We are headquartered in New York. We have offices in Boston, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Charlotte, a number of offices in Europe to include London, as well as Geneva. And really what is unique about LifeSci is that we have a number, as you'll see on this slide, of different verticals. So LifeSci was founded as an investor relations firm. And so LifeSci Advisors is the investor relations division. We work with roughly 250 odd companies across the globe on the investor relations side of the business. The two founders, after really establishing themselves as the leader in healthcare IR advisory, they started to expand the offering out. The first vertical they then expanded to was LifeSci Communications, which started as a public relations agency, but has since really expanded their offerings to media, to social media, to doing brand strategy, et cetera. So that business has grown quite nicely as well. We do have our own venture fund. We have our own investment bank, which is LifeSci Capital, primarily known for our equity research and advising companies on pre-IPO and in doing a number of follow-on offerings. We do have an executive search division, and then we do have also two SPACs that we have de-SPACed, one of which is Vincerix, which is an oncology-focused company spun out of Bayer by Leaps. And the other most recent SPAC was Science 37, which is a decentralized clinical trials company. So that's just a bit of an overview of LifeSci Partners. Now, who is LifeSci Consulting? So we are, for all intents and purposes, a global strategy consultancy and transaction advisor, really looking to empower corporate and business development, as well as develop strategies that optimize companies' product and portfolio performance. So if you look at the tripod or the triangle here on the screen, we have strategy consulting, partnering in M&A, and then looking at the broader LifeSci platform. The focus of today's conversation will be strategy consulting. So what that means to us is strategic planning, doing commercial opportunity assessments, doing due diligence and business development support. As it pertains to product and portfolio strategy, that means go-to-market strategy and planning. That means competitive readiness, whether that's competitive intelligence analyses, war game scenarios, et cetera, and then growth planning, perhaps life cycle management. On the partnering side of the business, we do act as work with companies on both the buy side and the sell side to help companies infuse non-dilutive capital into their companies. And how do we do that? So the way in which we do that is helping structure and facilitating licensing agreements, R&D collaborations between primarily small biotechs and major and mid-sized pharma, whether those are global transactions or regionally based transactions. That business has been incredibly incredibly valuable over the last few years. We've closed 43 transactions totaling over $5.5 billion, in total deal value. The only reason that, or I guess one of the reasons that we bring up the LifeSci platform here is we do have the ability to dual track engagements, both look to non-dilutive and dilutive options to obtain capital. And then we do have a pretty substantial capital markets expertise as well. Why that's important? When we're doing a lot of the strategy consulting work, we are investors ourselves. As I mentioned, we have an investment bank, we have a VC fund, we have a SPAC. We know what investors, what segments of information investors are going to ask you as a company. What is your competitive, what do your competitors look like? What are they doing from an endpoint perspective? What are they studying? When are their readouts coming? Where do you fit within the treatment paradigm? What pricing could you potentially get for an asset? Because again, we are investors, we can anticipate a lot of these questions, and therefore it really helps a lot of our really strategy consulting focused engagements. So that's why we bring that up there. If we look to jump to the next slide, the leadership team, we do have 8 partners in the group. Obviously, myself and Trey are on the call. A number of other individual partners are listed here. What's unique about our division? We are heavily scientifically focused, even though I myself am not. Rob Humke has a PhD, Mike Icavella has a PhD, Christian Musa has an MD, Michael Turner has an MBA. If we look at the broader team, we are heavily focused on scientific degrees. So that is the team. I'll skip over this as well as this and just really talk about the strategy consulting business. So really we bucket the strategy consulting in kind of 2 different categories. As I mentioned, corporate strategy and business development, the other being product and portfolio strategy. So the bucket on the left is really focused on supporting internal strategic planning, investor engagement, business development activities, and just more broadly, key engagement and communications with larger external stakeholders and really bolstering your value proposition to those individuals you're talking with. The other product and portfolio strategy is really focused on developing strategies to optimize your commercial performance of whether it's a product or a portfolio, and ultimately, and many times ensure the readiness for the evolving global dynamics. So I'll pause there because I know I've kind of monopolized some of the time so far. Trey, anything you'd want to add to this point?
Yeah, maybe quickly just to emphasize kind of the value of working with an organization like ours. I think Michael already hit the nail on the head with regard to our experience on a strategic partnering front and within the investor community as investors ourselves. I think that kind of bolsters and supports the output of our strategy consulting deliverables. But I think it's also important to note that we have a breadth of experience across therapeutic areas, across different pockets and domain of the healthcare market that a pharmaceutical organization may not have in-house already. So for example, from a drug pricing perspective, we're able to pull in drug analogs from other therapeutic areas or other domains that one of our clients may not be focused on. We have individuals, like Michael said, with experience on the scientific side, but we also have a number of folks with more commercial strategy experience or pricing and market access or sales force sizing. So working with a group like ours just offers our clients a diversity of perspectives and more longitudinal industry experience that a client might not have otherwise in-house.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, very well said, Trey. Strategy consulting and what I wanted to focus on really today is for corporate strategy and business development. And this really speaks to, whether you're engaging with pharma companies, whether you're engaging with investors. I think what is really important, and it's interesting, look, it's one thing for me to sit up here and say, you need to do this work, you need to do commercial opportunity assessments, you need to run valuations, et cetera. I was on, shockingly, Twitter a few weeks ago, and there was a very prominent investor who was at a tier A VC firm, and she tweeted out that, and really effectively begging companies that before they come to venture capitalist or any investor for that matter, please, please, please know your product in and out, but not just your product. Know who your competitors are. Where are they in development? What are their differentiators? When are they going to have data readouts? And for your product specifically, what is your commercial opportunity? Where do you fit in the treatment paradigm? What are the current pricing and market access considerations for your product? And really saying, effectively, the tweet alluded to, if you don't have these ducks in a row, for lack of a better phrase, it's very difficult and perhaps puts you at a disadvantage of garnering the attention of a lot of these investors. And that's really, again, what my group focuses on here with our strategy consulting practice, to help you to be able to answer those questions when you're sitting in front of, I don't know, whoever it may be on the private side, whether it's OrbiMed, RA Capital, Vivo Capital, Life Sciences Partners, whoever it may be, to be able to say, I understand your question. We've done this research, and this is what the research is showing us. Now, what does that research look like? We do have a sanitized example of an engagement that we recently conducted that I wanted to share also today, with the group. So with that, I will bring up a different presentation. Trey, can we see the sanitized deliverable now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a sanitized commercial opportunity assessment that we conducted specifically for a company in the oncology space. The company engaged us to conduct both secondary market research as well as primary market research. So for those who are unfamiliar with that vernacular, secondary research, quite simply, is bench research, looking through publications, databases that we have access to, literature reviews, pretty intensive in, the bench research that goes into that. Primary market research is where we'll interview physicians, and those physicians can be what you'll often referred as key opinion leaders. Those physicians who are thought leaders, heavily involved in the science, heavily involved in looking at new products. Many times the KOLs will be on scientific advisory boards for major or mid-sized pharma companies. And then there's also HVPs, or high volume prescribers. Those are the physicians who are in the trenches, let's say, heavily focused on, treating patients day in, day out, those who are writing the most scripts, et cetera. So that's the difference between secondary and primary market research. And for this engagement, the company wanted us to conduct both secondary market research as well as primary market research across a certain disease state, and I believe actually disease states, and ultimately drive to a projected net revenue forecast across the US and the EU. Now, this was used both for engagement with investors as well as engagement with strategic partners. And why that's important for strategic partners: if you're ultimately going to do a licensing deal, obviously you need to derive net revenue to be able to then import that or input that into a valuation model and figure out what deal terms you could arrive at, or at least, come to an agreement on. So for this, maybe I'll pause there. Trey, any comments on that engagement that we conducted in particular?
Yeah, just a quick commentary, I guess, on this client for whom we performed this analysis. I think the client felt like they were banging their head against the wall a bit in terms of their discussions with both investors and potential strategic partners, insofar as this was an oncology indication, but it was somewhat esoteric, and really the value story of their drug was not resonating at the time that they engaged us. And part of our purview was not only to generate the commercial revenue forecast, but also just understand from a physician's perspective the degree of unmet need within the indication, how they might use the drug, and where in the line of therapy they would use the drug, to answer some of the more qualitative questions they were getting from investors and strategic partners. And so ultimately what you'll see in this document, as Michael goes through it quickly, is a blend of more of those qualitative insights around what the kind of current and future treatment paradigm might look like upon potential approval of this product, but also some of the, of course, quantitative outputs that ultimately inform the commercial forecast. And as far as the output of this work, I think it really bolstered our outreach, particularly on the partnering side, and we were able to kind of drive towards more actionable deal discussions, and we're actually kind of in the definitive agreement negotiation stage at this point. And I think a lot of our ability to kind of generate interest from partners was driven by having a robust commercial story around the asset.
No, 100% agree, Trey. And, again, we have roughly 3 minutes. So I want to go, through this quickly, but I think Trey makes a really good point as it pertains to strategic partners. This type of work, when you're doing a deal with a strategic partner, is part of the confidential information packet. They do expect you to have views, comments, data on a lot of this. They will expect you, whether you want to share it or not, viewpoint on, roughly what's the commercial opportunity. Again, where do you fit in that treatment paradigm? Why do you fit in that treatment paradigm? Where you think you do. And look, secondary market research is wonderful to use that as, leverage of why you think why you think where you fit, but leveraging that and bolstering that with primary market research is infinitely more powerful. Look, a lot of firms out there will tell you that, that the number comes up of how many physicians do I need to interview? What makes us unique, again, is because we're investors ourselves and because we have a partnering business. What we hear from investors and strategic partners, 9 times out of 10, critical mass, and Trey can speak to this as well, critical mass for the number of KOLs that you need to interview. Look, it can vary by disease state. 20 is the number. If you have 20 KOLs and you take that to any pharma company, that's going to be enough. You don't need to interview 50, 60, 100 KOLs. 20 is the number, and you can get away with a little bit less there as well. So, again, just running through this, we have I'm sorry, Trey, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I'd be remiss not to at least touch on payer interviews as well. I think pricing and market access is an increased focus for investors and strategic partners. In fact, I think it's one of the first questions. And, I think that's an area where we're able to offer a lot of value to clients as well, whom in many cases don't have a ton of internal expertise. But there's a lot of moving pieces from a pricing perspective, really across geographies, be it the drug pricing reform that we're experiencing here in the US, in Europe, the continued emphasis on value-based healthcare and HECON data, additional price scrutiny, and then for emerging markets like China, very attractive large market, but significant pricing challenges. So our payer research is able to navigate that environment as well, and most of our decks will include some insights there.
No, that's a great point. And maybe with 30 seconds, left, Trey, we can kind of hammer that point even further. What's interesting from a deal perspective, and we heard this on a panel that LifeSci moderated, is that companies, strategic pharma companies, are starting to structure agreements whereby milestone payments are dependent upon what level of reimbursement you get. So if you get X level, there's X terms. If you get Y level, there's Y terms. So it really speaks to Trey's point about the need, even early on. We're doing payer research for phase 1 preclinical assets, speaking to payers. It is becoming infinitely more important for earlier stage assets if you want to do a deal. So this is the type of work that we can do. Happy to chat with anybody who has questions, wants to get in touch. Please do so. And it's wonderful to have the time this afternoon. We appreciate everyone's time and hopefully look forward to hearing from some of you in the future. Thank you.